Welcome back to No Fly Zone Podcast. We are going to be covering that goddamn moon. Hey, KC, how you doing?
Living the fucking dream, Bret. How are you?
Doing great. We got a first-time guest with us. We got Boogie representing out California, joining us on tonight's episode.
What's up, Boogie? Living the dream again. So we've never had Boogie on before, so he doesn't know what fucking train wrecks we are. We're about to educate him. Tonight, we've got him, I think it's Bret's future brother-in-law, so he knows us, but he's our first official, non-bullied guest. We just said, hey, come on the podcast. He's like, yeah. Everyone else we had to bully super hard to get here, but for those of you who missed it, we just released our part 1 of the CERN LHC conspiracy theory episodes. We do have part 2 already filmed. We're just, as usual, running into a lot of different bullshit trying to get that out and filmed or posted. So we have that coming up.
I say government censorship.
It's a goddamn birds. It's the birds. Okay. We also released our first episode of Night Terrors, which is my personal hijacking of the podcast during my insomniac hours in order to bring you all sorts of dumpster fire goodness and ghosts. So if you missed that, make sure you catch it. We'll be filming another episode here soon if I can find someone else with a ghost story. Hint, anyone want to come tell me ghost stories? Perfect. Okay, Boogie, you're lined stories. Up. All right, so what else do we have? Go follow us on our socials. Speaking of socials.
Oh, yeah. This developed as of today, I believe, JC.
I would like to mark our milestone of fame. We have acquired our first troll, our first social media troll, and it's a doozy. He's a fun one. I'm not going to say his name because I feel like that's like explicit bullying, and I'm more trying to 99% bully instead of that full 100. He's currently up on our Instagrams. He is ranting about some crazy shit. Most notable, I'm not. It's hard to tell what he's actually mad about, but he's really feeling passionate about it, whatever it is. Primarily, I do believe that he believes that I am trans and I am pushing trans propaganda, which, yeah, I totally am, actually. Well, I'm not trans, but I am going to push the propaganda. So we are going to be super LGBTQ allies here on this show. I don't give a fuck what you think about that. If you're big mad about it, please go drive up the comments on the socials. So yeah, I'm cisgender, but I'm a huge ally, and I will not have any disrespect to my queer and trans friends. You can fight me anytime, anywhere, for any reason. Full stop. We are making sure that all of our guests receive a disclaimer about our rules here on the show, which is about, you can make fun of whatever religion, you can cuss, you can talk shit on whatever you want, all politics, whatever, but we're going to be respectful of genders, identities, social status, race, all that shit. Comprende?
Comprende.
All right. Jump off my soapbox there. Are you ready to jump into this episode?
I am. This is something that really interests me, and there's a lot of arguments on both sides about this being real and about this being fake.
There is, and for those of you who maybe didn't read the title, or maybe you're in our audience listening, we have an audience. Okay. We're going to talk about the goddamn moon. All right? Specifically, the moon landing and whether or not that is fake or real. Bret, I do want to ask before we start, what foot are you starting off on? What do you believe right now?
I'm in the middle because I think that there's far leaning on both sides and the truth somewhere in the middle. I don't fully trust NASA. I don't fully trust conspiracy theorists.
So it's less about what you know to be true or not, and more of I just don't trust these entities and corporations.
Yes, and I have questions that I would like to validate further.
That's fair. Boogie, do you have a strong opinion on whether or not the moon landing was fake or real?
I think it's more real. I used to be in the middle,
All right.
So I understand that too, but yeah, on the more.
All right, so we got a realer.
Side now.
Bret has suddenly become a moderate. When did that happen? Fucking liar. Bret. He sends me crazy videos all day long, and I also have to ask. So that video you sent me earlier about breaking out of the Matrix, was that ironic or not?
Well, according to the algorithm on TikTok, I was selected.
Bret sent me a video earlier saying, if this secret 100011 code finds you, congratulations, you made it out of the Matrix. But with no commentary, he just sent it to me, and I'm like,
You knew what it meant.
like, is he real? Is this for real? Like, are you high right now? I can't tell. So, what's that?
It was meant.
It was meant to be. I was
It
meant
was
to break
meant
out
to
of the
be.
Matrix. So we're gonna
Yeah.
okay, before I go all the way into this, I do back to our troll. Thank you, buddy. We had a whole roast prepared for you. Might save that for later. I do want to thank my good friends Tasha, Rachel, and Ian, all of whom came out swinging when they saw these comments and like bum rushed this guy, and then he disappeared.
Professionals have standards.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh man, he got fucking mobbed. He was not ready. So, anyways, we're gonna talk about the highly debated moon landing. Okay, in quotes. The fake moon landing theory in particular. Kind of thought people would be overhearing about this, but apparently not, because we have every single person that I've talked to, it's the first thing they jump on. Like, it's a bowl of free candy. Unreal. So originally I thought we might be able to hit multiple points in this episode, but I don't believe we're going to be able to do that. Like, there's a hollow moon conspiracy theory, dark side of the moon shit. Tonight we're only going to talk about the fake moon landing because there's so much bullshit here. Because people think there's some super extra spicy bullshit going on the dark side of the moon. Stay tuned for that. Bret, I'm going to let you pick up and tell us just the basics of the moon landing.
Okay, for the moon landing, the Apollo 11 moon landing on July 20th, 1969, was one of the most astonishing achievements in human history. That day, an estimated 530 million TV viewers watched U.S. astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin take their first steps on the moon. Afterwards, the two men and the third crew member, the unsung, I call this guy the unsung hero, Michael Collins, flew safely back to Earth and landed in the Pacific Ocean. Yet, just a few years later, some people claimed that the giant leap for mankind had been faked. Conspiracy theories that the moon landing was actually a hoax that the U.S. government had staged to win the space race with the Soviets began to gain traction in the mid-1970s. So to sum it up, it took 400,000 NASA employees and contractors to put Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon in 1969, but only one man to spread the idea that it was all a hoax. His name was Bill KC. Hardcore moon truthers would recognize that name. A book written in 1976, We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion swindle. So between this book, his reported rocket experience, and his spiraling mental health, Bill KC became known as the man who kind of stoked this conspiracy flame, and we're going to dive into him a little bit in his role.
You guys heard of this guy?
I didn't know this guy was the cancer that kind of started.
He really was. It takes one guy, and it's over for everybody. Again, people who are super into this theory, because there's people who are like crazy hardcore into this. He basically wrote their Bible. He wrote a couple of different books, but this one was the one that kind of added all this fuel to the fire. He originally started out working as a technical writer, like writing, okay, at Rocketdyne's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is a division of North American Aviation, in 1956. And this is in the period prior to the development of the Apollo missions. In later years, he moved up to a bunch of different things. So he became a service analyst, service engineer, and in 62, a publications analyst. From 56 to 63, he served as head of technical publications for Rocketdyne. So now he's like the boss. And then in 63, he resigned for personal reasons. So he goes through quite a few different things here, but primarily he's writing. What he's writing, I'm not sure. But in the years that followed, KC has been described as suffering from chronic anxiety, which over time turned into full-blown disillusionment with modern life, leading him to get rid of the family television over the objections of his family, to trash his radio, and to cancel his newspaper subscription. Thereafter, he led his family initially into an itinerant lifestyle, one that eventually led to the breakup of the family, but he also wanted an opportunity to write about this kind of off-the-grid lifestyle. He continues to spiral at this point. Writing kind of takes on some darker tones, some more like out there overtones. He was encouraging things like tax evasion and social protest, and just kind of like slowly edging off the deep end here. So he would come to assert in a new vein of writing that came to fruition in the mid-70s that during his much earlier tenure at Rocketdyne, he had been privy to documents pertaining to the Atlas and Apollo programs. And he argued that one didn't really need an engineering or a science degree to determine that a hoax was being perpetrated on the American public and everybody else. So in his account of this intellectual development, the Rocketdyne scientist with whom he worked, so according to him in his book, not verified, the scientist he worked with expressed to him that there was enough technology at the time to perhaps send a crewed rocket to the moon, but definitely not enough technology to develop a return safely to Earth. They also spoke of the very real problem of traveling through atmospheric radiation without harm to the astronauts as a problem that yet needed to be solved. Even before July of '69, he had a hunch, an intuition, a true conviction, and decided that he did not believe that anyone was going to the moon now or ever.
Like, I mean, I see like little like shades of midlife crisis going on too.
Yeah,
here,
a little bit.
possibly.
I feel like the people who knew him, like, surely you become concerned, right? Like, okay, this guy is like really losing his shit. Just imagine having a mental break and then people starting basically a cult about it. Yeah, just
He's a little bright.
Little break. I'm gonna let Bret tell you a little bit more about that book and some of the stuff that he brings up or throws out there, and which was later taken as scripture by everyone who believes this.
Oh, a gospel. Okay. Casing thus wrote a book titled We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion Swindle, which was self-published in 1976 and republished by Health Research Books in 2002. So when he first published this, he had to self-publish, and then it didn't get picked up by a publisher until 2002. In his book, Casing introduced arguments which he said proved the moon landings were fake. Claims in the book and subsequent sources, including that NASA lacked technical expertise to put a man on the moon. The absence of stars in the lunar surface photographs was indicative of a hoax. There were unexplained optical... Yes, that word, thank you. There were unexplained optical anomalies in the photographers taken on the moon. There was an absence of blast craters beneath the lunar modules, and that the rocket engines of the lunar modules should have generated an enormous dust cloud near their landing sites during the final seconds of descent. The death of Thomas Barron, a quality control and safety inspector for North American aviation, was mysterious and indicative of a hoax. He also noted that Dutch newspapers questioned the authenticity of the moon landings.
If all this shit sounds familiar, it's because it's the same shit everyone's been regurgitating about why we never landed on the moon. When in fact, what that is a lack of knowing how to use Google to find the answers to your questions.
Mm-hmm.
Bret, out of all of those, what is the most legit to you?
I would say since the gravity's so light, why was there not dust when the lunar module landed? Like, I think like something would kick up or float.
It did.
Okay. I just probably need to rewatch that really grainy 1960s video footage again.
One of the comments they have about, first of all, I know we're back to, or kind of hijacking this. Mythbusters did a really, really, really good episode on this, where they created a bunch of experiments, like the way that a rocket or a thruster could operate in zero gravity, me failing to understand the scientific terms or sound remotely intelligent. It made sense, and I highly recommend people go and watch that, especially for that.
I watched it.
For that particular experiment, for me not knowing like physics and science and rocketry and shit, visually seeing that like made the most sense to me out of everything I've read, because I've read a lot of shit that kind of just like, you know, my eyes were glazed. I'm like, I don't know what I'm reading. It sounds really smart though. Casing didn't stop there though with these moon landing hoax conspiracies. He went on to claim that that NASA staged the Apollo 1 fire, which most people may or may not know about, but it was a 1, okay? We're now at Apollo 11, so there's 11 attempts between then and now. In the Space Shuttle Challenger accident, deliberately murdering the astronauts on board, and suggested that NASA might have learned these astronauts were about to expose the conspiracy and needed to guarantee their silence, so NASA just murdered them. He also believed, like we mentioned, that the disappearance of Thomas Barron's 500-page report on the Apollo 1 fire and Barron's death in a rail traffic accident a week after he testified before the U.S. Congress, those were not accidents. Now, people get really deep into that. We're glazing over the Thomas Barron thing. People get really deep into this. Like, they've constructed, I guess his vehicle was attempting to cross railroad tracks, and he was struck by a train. Okay, and again, this is a week before he's set to testify before Congress, and they did all sorts of like algorithms and equations about how the debris where it ended up was, it was like he was just stopped on the tracks for some reason. So they had this whole theory that his car was hijacked or someone just parked his car on the tracks and covered it all up. There's people get so deep into this shit. Have you seen
Oh, so it's
anything
like it.
about that?
No, but that sounds like if you are on the Clintons hit list.
Yeah, they're just gonna go into your cell and suicide you. So there's more. He was a vocal advocate of conspiracy theories and, highlight the word vocal. Love to talk about this shit. So he also believed there to be a high-level conspiracy involving the CIA, the Federal Reserve, the IRS, and other government agencies to brainwash the American public, poison their food supply, and control the media. So yeah, just overall like a really mentally stable guy. And the reason that, again, I wanted to talk about casing and bring up all the weird shit that he believed is because he quite literally initiated almost all the material which persists to this day to inform the belief of theorists worldwide. And history lesson time.
Yeah, he brings up some points, and I don't think that he's 100% right, but I also don't think those agencies tell 100% the truth. So like I said, I'm kind of in the middle there.
Right. Well, a lot of this comes down to like, who are you most willing to believe? I wish we'd had more time on this. I say only a few minutes in because we just don't have it. There's so much. I do want to make sure that we set the stage for you about why there was such urgency and interest in going to space in the first place. So I'm going to let Brett do his favorite thing and talk about super boring stuff.
Oh, the Cold War heating up. Okay. Well, after World War II drew to a close in the mid-20th century, a new conflict began. Known as the Cold War, this battle pitted the world's two great powers of the democratic capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union against each other. Beginning in the late 1950s, space would become another dramatic arena for this competition, as each side sought to prove superiority of its technology, its military firepower, and by extension, its political economic system. And they believed that whoever won space would basically be able to defend themselves or run the world. Like you'd be the number one superpower.
Well, I mean, I can only imagine
space.
If you don't know much about space travel or anything, and all you have is like black and white sci-fi movies, you're imagining that whoever makes it into space first is gonna like murder you from space, like be raining down missiles and bombs and shit. And like Star Wars doesn't exist, you don't have Star Wars technology yet, so how are you gonna like defend yourself from that?
Space fleet.
What's that?
Like just
space
there
fleet.
has
Yeah,
a
we
space fleet.
need a space fleet, which we still don't have. Anyway, sorry, Brad, go ahead.
So the causes of the space race in the mid 1950s, the U.S. and the Soviet Cold War had worked its way into the fabric of everyday life in both countries. Fueled by the arms race and the growing threat of nuclear weapons, wide-ranging espionage and counter-espionage between the two countries, war in Korea, and a clash of words and ideas carried out in the media. These tensions will continue throughout the space race, exacerbated by such events as the construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, and the outbreak of war in Southeast Asia. So, space exploration served as another dramatic arena for the Cold War competition. On October 4th, 1957, a Soviet R-7 intercontinental ballistic missile launched Sputnik, Russian for traveler, the world's first artificial satellite and the first man-made object to be placed into Earth's orbit. That's pretty cool. So the Russians were the first that we're told about that actually made this happen.
So they kind of did win a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, for the beginning of the space race, we did not win anything. It was all the Russians.
So we're like falling behind. I can only imagine the under pressure.
The pressure to get results, yes, or fake results. So Sputnik's launch came as a surprise and not a pleasant one to most Americans. In the United States, space was seen as the next frontier, a logical extension of the grand American tradition of exploration, and it was crucial not to lose too much ground to the Soviets. In addition, this demonstration of the overwhelming power of the R-7 missile, seemingly capable of delivering nuclear warhead into U.S. airspace, made gathering intelligence about Soviet military activities particularly urgent. So in 1958, the United States launched its own satellite, Explorer 1, designed by the United States Army under the direction of rocket scientist Werner von Braun. So that's Operation Paperclip. That's a whole
remember
nother
that name.
deep dive. So yeah, Werner von Braun, the Nazi. That same year, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed a public order creating the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, a federal agency dedicated to space exploration.
Every single time I read the meaning of that acronym, I think I'll remember it for the rest of my life. And then 60 seconds later, I'm like, what does NASA stand for? So we're setting the stage for either, groundbreaking scientific advancement or maybe some super shady bullshit, because we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves in this very, very public country versus country little pissing match we have going on here. And at the time, propaganda was everything. It was back when news reporters talk like this, and don't you love America, folks? And it was all this like pressuring people to be patriotic and support your country, and we're the best on earth, and we're gonna win, and we're gonna beat them damn commies.
Yeah, they didn't.
Wasn't that 70s show?
Yeah.
That 70s show that like Red Foreman. I can just see him like telling Eric, like, we can't let them commies win.
Damn commies. Boogie, what were you saying? We're bad about having 3 people.
Oh no, you're good. I think my microphone might not be working too well.
Yeah, no, I can hear you
okay?
just fine.
We're gonna keep talking
Okay.
about what, like, literally when I think space race, the first thing that pops into my head is a fucking chimpanzee in a bubble helmet. So I was like, where's the fucking monkeys in this story? So I got the monkey part. Yeah, I did. In 1959, the Soviet space program took another step forward with the launch of Luna 2, the first space probe to hit the moon. Probe to hit the moon. In April of 1961, the Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first person to orbit Earth, traveling in the capsule-like spacecraft Vostok 1. So, for the U.S. effort to send a man into space, dubbed Project Mercury, NASA engineers designed a smaller cone-shaped capsule far lighter than Vostok, and they tested the craft with chimpanzees and held the final test flight in March of 1961 before the Soviets were able to pull ahead with Gagarin's launch. On May 5th, astronaut Alan Shepard became the first American in space, though not in orbit. You ever heard the name Alan Shepard?
No.
Is that the name of the character in Mass Effect?
Yeah, I think so. Shepard. It's
Is it Shepard? Shepard
is
something.
I don't know what his first name is. But I heard that. I'm like, poor Alan Shepard. Imagine being the first American into space and nobody like
ever
like nothing. God. You just completely
You're forgotten.
like deleted. So this is what everyone remembers. Again, like those little tidbits you remember when the term space race comes up. Later that May, President JFK, the myth, the man, and the legend, he made the very bold, very public claim that the U.S. would, in fact, land a man on the moon before the end of the decade. In February 1962, John Glenn became the first American to orbit Earth, and by the end of that year, the foundations of NASA's lunar landing program, dubbed Project Apollo, were in place.
Interesting.
You ever heard the name John Glenn?
Yeah.
R.I.P. the forgotten ones.
Yeah, they get their credit that's due. So some of the achievements of Apollo from 1961 to 64, NASA's budget was increased almost 500%, and the lunar landing program eventually involved some 34,000 NASA employees and 375,000 employees of industrial and university contractors. Apollo suffered a setback in January of 1967 when 3 astronauts were killed after their spacecraft caught fire during a launch simulation, Apollo 1. Meanwhile, the Soviets' lunar landing program proceeded tentatively, partly due to internal debate over its necessity and to the untimely death of 1966 of Sergei Korolyov, chief engineer of the Soviet space program. Hey, I'm trying on this Russian name. I'm sorry. Apologies.
Korolyov. I don't
Okay, say that 3 times fast.
No.
In December of 68, saw the launch of Apollo 8, the first manned space mission to orbit the moon. From NASA's massive launch facility on Merritt Island near Cape Canaveral, Florida, on July 16th of 69, U.S. astronauts Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin, and Michael Collins set off on the Apollo 11 space mission, the first lunar landing attempt. After landing successfully on July 20th, Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon's surface. He famously called the moment one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mm-hmm.
So all that's a big fucking deal.
All right. So we've laid the groundwork. We've talked about the Cold War, the Russians, the space race, the Korolyovs, the Spruce Pubes. So we all understand the global setting of what's happening here. Questions?
Yes.
Kids.
This was a dick measuring contest.
I could not have put it more astutely myself.
That's
so
what I think
it's a
too.
giant pissing match
Pretty
between
much.
two superpowers over Star Wars, basically.
When it should have been about space.
This is no longer about scientific advancement or learning or research or education. This is about, I'm going to put a goddamn spaceship on that goddamn rock, or I'm going to kill everyone trying. Like,
I'm going to turn communist.
So now we get to the fun parts. Now that we laid out all the really boring shit that I felt like was important. I know, I'm not the fun one, okay? I'm like the mean parent or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Professional Baby Daddy, shut up. Why do people think that the moon landing never happened? Okay. There's a lot of bullshit out there, folks. But according to History.com, which the name alone inspires confidence, although all these claims that we're going to talk about are false and easily debunked, they have persisted. They are like, I don't know, a pimple on your face that you just keep picking at, won't go away. It's probably a better analogy than that. So we're going to put some more time and attention into a few of the bigger ones, like the number ones claims people like to throw out there. But there are so many more.
So for conspiracy number 1, the moon landing is fake because the American flag looks like it is flapping in the wind.
Would we agree that it looks like the American flag is flapping in the wind in these videos?
It does. On the one that they filmed, it does look like that.
All right. Why does the American flag look like it looks when they stick it in the ground? So, if you look at the American flag in still pictures from the Apollo 11 mission, it appears to be flapping in the wind. But how can that be? There's no wind on the moon. And if you look at videos as well, it also is moving quite a bit. The simple answer is just that it isn't flapping at all. That's because it is not an ordinary flag. All right? They spent, how many? 400,000 people? 400,000 people got together to send these guys to the moon. They thought about the flag that was going to be broadcast to the world, I promise. Okay? If the astronauts had planted a regular flag on the moon, it would have hung slack, just like flags do on Earth when there's no wind. This wouldn't make for a very appealing photo or video footage. So NASA designed special flags for the astronauts to take with them. All 6 Apollo missions that did make it to the moon planted American flags up there. So the flags actually had like a horizontal rod inside them, like a L-shaped business.
Yeah, I was looking at
to make them stick out from the
Like,
flagpole, which makes perfect sense, right? If you stop and think about it. The movement of the flag in the videos is because the hard surface that I guess they were trying to stick it into was just not cooperating. So he was twisting the pole to try to get that flagpole to stick in the ground. So there is some movement. And then, of course, the flag is super crinkled and people are like, oh, it doesn't look right. It was fucking vacuum sealed to go to space.
I mean, yeah.
In a bag. So, yeah, it was wrinkled, guys.
And I think the movement lasts longer since there's no gravity.
Yeah, so every
Like
single
that.
vibration of the pole is causing movement that would otherwise be halted by Earth's gravity because of the whatever fucking physics in space. Hashtag insert science here. I don't know. So after the astronauts step away, it stays in the same bent shape because of the partially extended rod that's in there. And then I we talked about why it's wrinkled. So this one to me is one of those extremely weak ones, like super easy to explain, right?
Well, number 2 argument is that the moon landing is fake because you cannot see the stars.
Okay. So, guys, we have audience members tonight, which I love that they're sending us questions. So, one of the questions that we just got in from our audience is, are you guys going to discuss why we haven't gone back to the moon? We really have theories on that. Brett, please don't let me forget.
I won't.
I have a 60-second memory bank. So, the stars. This one, again, seems like so incredibly weak to me. Unbelievably weak. Like, for example, you take your phone outside at night and you take a picture of the sky. Are you gonna see fucking stars on your camera? No, because the way that like camera apertures work is if you want the brightest thing in the picture to show up, then the darkest things aren't gonna show up, right? So it seems like one of the easiest ones to debunk is the fact that there are no stars in the lunar sky. Yeah, the stars are there, you just can't see them. There's no stars in the pictures. So in the ones that
And
what?
the surface of the moon's like, or I don't know if you're gonna say that. So.
No, you go ahead. If you have the answer, I would rather you say it. Go ahead. I talk too much.
Oh, my bad. I think the surface of the moon is like way too bright
So you're right.
for it. Stars in the background.
You're exactly right. Is all the exposures of the astronauts on the moon are daylight exposures, right? You can see the sun reflecting off the surface of the moon. Brett, go ahead.
Why have we never had like a night exposure of it? Like I don't know. Like I get why the wouldn't show up in those pictures with the reflective surface of the moon, but like there's never pictures from the space station. When they're on the dark side of Earth or whatever, getting the pictures of this, a selfie or seeing outer space, and that is an argument some people bring up.
The dark side of the Earth.
No, like when the Earth's up facing away from the sun. Like the space station, the ISS.
Oh, like
yeah, or like doing a selfie, and then
because
then it's dark, right? So then you should be able to see the stars. Like there's people that make the arguments.
I just want
to
clarify that you're mad the astronauts didn't take enough selfies on the moon.
Yes, I'm saying whenever they do take pictures, it's always when the sun is shining or there's a reflective surface. They never do one when it's dark, and that's something that people point out.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
I believe a lot of that has to do with like environmental safety concerns for the lives of the astronauts, but I don't know. I imagine that there's already a lot of safety hazards happening. So basically, we're talking about the exposure on the camera, right? It's too short to capture the spacesuits and the moon surface while also capturing the much dimmer, comparatively, stars. It's the same reason you can't see stars when you go outside at night. Can't take pictures of them unless you have like a super high exposure camera, like one where the aperture stays open for like quite a while, which is how they do night photography as well. The aperture of the camera must stay open for, sometimes up to 30 seconds to a minute even, in order to fully absorb the dim light from the stars into the camera, right? So a quick exposure camera just can't capture that dim of a light when you're standing on a much brighter surface comparatively. So to me, again, this one seems like unbelievably weak, but it's still one that people bring up quite often, is why aren't there stars in the photos?
Yep. I mean, I can see why they bring it up. I mean, you'd think that there's no atmosphere like Earth. I mean, if you've been out in the desert in Arizona, you look up at the sky, it's brilliant. Like you can see all the stars. Mm-hmm. So if you're on the moon, like you can imagine no atmosphere, no interference, you should be able to see everything, which the astronauts probably did.
I believe they probably could. Yeah. I'm assuming they saw incredible shit, but we're talking about cameras in what year was it? 69? Yeah. Nice. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
But
go ahead.
Argument number 3: the moon landing is fake because the shadows aren't right.
Okay, what do we think about this one?
I think. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think it's similar to like the stars. Like it's the sun. Like I think they were saying that like the only source is the sun's light, but then you also got the surface of the moon being bright and like shining.
And I think the sand's reflective too.
Well, that's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have something on Earth called atmospheric scattering, which is just our atmosphere, like pew pew particles of light, right? Which we don't have. I'm not even reading this, so I know I'm going to come across it and repeat myself. But in the images from the moon landing, it is possible to see certain objects, even though they're in shadow. So skeptics argue that if the sun were the only source of light, this wouldn't be the case. Therefore, the fact that you can see some objects in shadow must be the result of special Hollywood lighting, right? And the problem with this theory is that although the sun is the main source of illumination on the moon, it isn't the only source of illumination. So another source is the lunar ground, like we talked about, surface of the moon, which reflects the sun's light. And in the Apollo 11 pictures, the sunlight is being scattered or reflected off the ground every which way, and some of it, a small fraction, but enough to be able to see, scatters into the shadows, which is why in the images you can make out the plaque that Armstrong and Aldrin left on the moon, even though it's laying in shadow. They also talk about how the extremely bright white of the astronaut suits and the reflections from the Eagle and all of that were also reflective surfaces that were reflecting in ways that they wouldn't normally on Earth. What do we think?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the Mythbusters where they recreated the sand or whatever. My only issue is they got the recipe for it from NASA. So that's the only part that still sketches me out a little bit about it. Like, I can understand being reflective and doing that. Like, I understand that concept, but like when the people that you think might be faking it are giving you the recipe to make the reflective sand, like that's a little fishy to me.
So you think they also made fake reflective sand?
I'm just saying it raises questions. That's all I'm saying.
So none of this is designed to really like change your mind one way or another about any of this, but more to provide the plausible and supposedly real scientific explanation, and then you can decide what checks out to you, because you could really just choose to distrust any of this information if you wanted to. It's just, I'm sure it's frustrating to spend your entire life studying science, achieving these really fancy degrees, spending a lot of time and money to study and working hard for these achievements, and then everyone's like, NASA gave us fake moon sand recipes, and then like all your work is for nothing. Like, I just imagine how enraged I would be if I worked that hard, and then everyone's like, it's fake sand, or like the recipe's wrong, and you're like, God.
So conspiracy number 4 is that the moon landing is fake because you cannot see Armstrong's camera.
Okay, all of these to me are just so fucking weak. I'm never gonna come across one where this is a good one. All right, so in one of these pictures from the moon landing, you can see Armstrong clearly reflected in Aldrin's visor while Armstrong is taking a picture of Aldrin, right? Skeptics have pointed out that Armstrong isn't holding a camera. So someone else must be taking the picture. It's a camera crew, right?
They also attached like cameras everywhere
Correct.
because they're going.
Yeah. So,
And, like,
go ahead.
Sorry, like on the vehicle.
Right. So a lot of these crazy theories are easily debunked when you notice the location of the cameras that they had mounted all over the place. So there are cameras mounted on the lunar lander. There were also cameras mounted to the front of each astronaut's spacesuit because they couldn't walk around holding a handheld camera and still be able to keep their balance and do everything else they needed to do. So in the reflection, you can actually see him with his hands there in the front of his suit where his camera's at. So yeah, so somebody in our audience just made a comment saying, you would think things like this would be common sense. Yeah, you'd think so. You would think. Common sense is the least common thing I've ever encountered. So that's why we are here to hand it to you on a very, very dumbed down silver platter.
Well,
you're welcome.
It is now uncommon sense because that shit's rare. So, conspiracy number 5, and this is a big one, and this was mentioned earlier in our comments. The moon landing is fake because Stanley Kubrick filmed it.
Why are people so obsessed with this one? People are like, have you heard this, Boogie?
I have not yet.
This is a popular one.
We are actually...
I should.
So most people have heard of or seen Stanley Kubrick's film 2001: A Space Odyssey, which wowed.
Do I need more?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do I need more medication for this?
A lot more. I recommend that whatever medication you have, wink, you consume or smoke or drink. Because yes, this is literally the kind of thing I feel like somebody who was really high just came up with. Like, you know what? Stanley Kubrick, guys. And everyone went, yeah, that sounds like totally that's logic. And they ran with it. So his film 2001: A Space Odyssey wowed audiences in 1968 for creating a realistic image of outer space. It was so compelling that some conspiracy theorists later wondered if the government had actually hired Kubrick to film the moon landing in a soundstage. The thing is, the moon landing footage didn't look real because Kubrick filmed it. Kubrick's movie 2001 looked real because Kubrick enlisted astronomical artists and aerospace engineers to help him with it. The only evidence, quote unquote, that Kubrick filmed the moon landing has itself proved to be a hoax, because there's been like, oh, this person came out and said XYZ thing. And then, of course, there's always the theory that, well, it looks so real, because they filmed it in space. Like, they just hired Stanley Kubrick to go to the moon and film the astronauts in space. So we're definitely not going to glaze over that as much as we usually do. We're going to break down the shining symbolism a bit further here in a minute. But first, let's discuss some other interesting points that conspiracy theorists like to point out. I didn't have a neat little place in the outline to put this, so I just kind of sledgehammered it in right here.
But it needs to be here.
Right.
It's about
It needs to be here.
It's about Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip was a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 Nazi German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from former Nazi Germany to the United States for government employment at the end of World War II in Europe between 1945 and 1959. And so they were like absolved of any, loyalty to the Nazi party. Like they were given American citizenship. Like they were like, you work for us, you get this. So special section subdivisions set up enemy personnel exploitation sections to manage and interrogate German scientists. The U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff established the first secret recruitment program called Operation Overcast on July 20th of 1945, initially to assist in shortening the Japanese war and to aid our post-war military research. In November of 1945, Operation Overcast was renamed Operation Paperclip by Ordnance Corps officers who attach a paperclip to the folders of those rocket experts whom they wish to employ in America. In a secret directive circulated on September 3rd of 1946, President Truman officially approved Operation Paperclip and expanded it to include 1,000 German scientists under the temporary limited military custody. So we're taking these other brilliant minds and like, you're going to work for us, and kind of like force them.
That's so vague. That's why I had to include that in quotes. Temporary limited military custody. Like, okay, these guys are going to disappear and never be heard from again. 1,600 Nazis came over here to work on our spaceships. That's how fucking desperate we were to get to the moon. So this to me is the shadiest, like, most real thing they did. Like,
you didn't want the Russians to get those 1,600 Nazis.
They can have 1,600 Nazis and space if we don't have to have Nazis. That's just my personal opinion. That's just wild. So obviously, who we talked about earlier, Werner von Braun, was one of the primary people who was like, there's a lot of people who have said that without him, we never would have made it to space at all. And there is so much conspiracy involved just around his name and that situation alone that we just simply do not have the fucking time. But here's another big one. You may remember that our buddy Bill Casing had very strong opinions on the Apollo 1 fire. So we're going to talk a little bit about what actually happened there. What NASA reports actually happened there. Is it possible that NASA like torched 3 of its own astronauts? Totally possible. Is it possible that there were like safety concerns that, may or may not have been foreseen that led to this tragedy? That's also possible. It really comes down to what lens you're looking at this through. So one of the worst tragedies in the history of spaceflight occurred on January 27th of 1967 when the crew of Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were killed in a fire in the Apollo command module during a pre-flight test at Cape Canaveral. They were training for the first crewed Apollo flight, an Earth orbiting mission scheduled to be launched on February 21st. They were taking part in something called a plugs out test, in which the command module was mounted on the Saturn 1B on the launch pad just as it would be for the actual launch, but the Saturn 1B was not fueled in this test run. So the plan was to go through the entire countdown sequence. So this happened at about 1 p.m. on the 27th, or on Friday, 27th of January. So they entered the capsule on pad 34 to begin the test, and a number of minor problems cropped up pretty immediately, which delayed the test, and finally a failure in communications forced them to stop the count at about 5:40 p.m. So now it's 6:30 p.m. This is the whole timeline here. Grissom said, which is a famous clip that they like to play in documentaries, "How are we going to get to the moon if we can't talk between 3 buildings?" Because the radios weren't working, they weren't able to hear each other. It's a lot of like repeating themselves and shit like that. Keep in mind this is Apollo 1. So yeah,
would
there's a
you
lot
call
of
this
bullshit going on.
failure to launch?
I would call this ignoring my brother. At 6:31 p.m., a surge was recorded in the AC bus 2 voltage readings, possibly indicating a short circuit. The cockpit recording is difficult to interpret in these places, but a few seconds later, one of the astronauts, probably Chaffee, is heard to say what sounds like flames. So it's like a garbled recording, but you can kind of hear what they think is the word flames. 2 seconds after that, White was heard to say, "We've got a fire in the cockpit." The fire spread throughout the cabin in a matter of seconds. Chaffee said, "We have a bad fire," followed by shouting, and the last crew communication ended 17 seconds after the first indication of the start of the fire, followed by the loss of all telemetry. The Apollo hatch, this is where it gets really fucky and sad. The Apollo hatch could only open inward and was held closed by a number of latches which had to be operated by ratchets. It was also held closed by the interior pressure, which was higher than outside atmospheric pressure, and required venting of the command module before the hatch could be opened. It took at least 90 seconds to get the hatch open under ideal circumstances. I know. This is really sad, honestly, because the cabin had been filled with a pure oxygen atmosphere at normal pressure for this test, this plugs out test, and there had been many hours for the oxygen to permeate all the material inside the cabin. The fire spread extremely rapidly, and the astronauts had no chance to get the hatch open. Nearby technicians tried to get to the hatch, but were repeatedly driven back by the heat and the smoke. By the time they succeeded in getting the hatch open, roughly 5 minutes after the fire started, the astronauts had already perished, probably within the first 30 seconds due to smoke inhalation and burns. As you might imagine, the Apollo program was put on hold for quite a while an exhaustive investigation was made of this accident. It was concluded that the most likely cause was a spark from a short circuit in a bundle of wires that ran to the left and just in front of Grissom's seat. The large amount of flammable material in the cabin and the oxygen environment allowed the fire to start and spread quickly. Sad
That's
shit.
not how I'd want to die.
Yeah.
I mean, you're all prepared to like die in space. Possibly, it's a possibility to die out there in the void, but like, oh my god, on the launch pad, wow.
On a test run.
No.
It's not even to actually take off.
Test run. Yeah, if any of you guys become astronauts, maybe don't get into anything with the number 1 on it. Maybe wait for at least like 8 or 9.
Well, and then a hatch that only opens inward where you need special tools or ratchets to open, like that sounds like extremely dangerous too.
Yeah, it was. And I believe, I cannot remember the exact numbers because again, I've downloaded so much fucking information into my brain the last couple days about this that it got really overwhelming. I'm like what's important? What's interesting? What's something like 5 seconds now for like the Apollo or the more recent Apollo spacecraft, like 11 through 17, like the hatch could be opened in like 5 seconds or less.
Yeah, I mean, oh boy. So going into missing tapes. So NASA released a statement addressing claims that the agency lost the footage from the Apollo 11 mission when the missing tapes supposed went up for auction via a former NASA intern in 2019. The search for the lost tapes began in 2006 when reports began surfacing that NASA had erased some original footage from the first moon landing. The agency conducted an intensive search at the time, but could not find the tapes. An intensive search of archives and records concluded that the most likely scenario was that the program managers determined there was no longer a need to keep the tapes, since all the video was recorded elsewhere, and they were erased and reused, NASA officials said in a statement. Oh, that's convenient.
No, I knew you were going to love this one.
However, it's just like the camera not working for Epstein. Like, okay, there's questions. However, NASA reaffirmed that there is no missing footage from Apollo 11 since the video transmissions were relayed to the Manned Spacecraft Center, known as the Johnson Space Center in Houston, during the mission. According to the statement, video from those tapes was converted to a format which could be broadcast on television. The agency restored the footage and released it in 2009 for the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon mission. There was no video that came down slow scan that was not converted live, fed live to Houston, and fed live to the world. NASA engineer Dick Navsger, what a name, who led the search for the footage and said at a news briefing about the lost tapes in 2009. So just in case anyone thinks there is a video out there that hasn't been seen, this is not the case. What do y'all make of them apples?
I fucking put this in here for
thank you. You're
welcome.
I don't believe in coincidences. So, there's also the claim that Buzz Aldrin saw a UFO outside the Apollo 11. And again, these are all...
I put this one in here for you claims. As well.
Claims.
There were certain things that... Look, I'm sitting there talking about how I'm going to write this outline, and Brett's like, don't forget, they deleted 2 minutes of footage, and don't forget, Buzz Aldrin saw UFOs outside. And I'm just like...
I'm just saying it's stuff to cover now. Because it is brought up. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so you wouldn't forget. Sir.
Anyways, so here's how this whole fucking misunderstanding came about. God, I can't believe you're making me do this. So there was actually a Reddit Ask Me Anything in 2014, which was hosted by Aldrin. Okay. So a user came up with a question: do you believe in aliens, and what are the sightings you saw aboard Apollo 11? So he answered this with a description of a light out the window that appeared to be moving alongside of us. People ran with that. Loved that comment. So there were many explanations of what that could be. Other than another spacecraft from another country or another world, it was either the rocket we had separated from, or the 4 panels that moved away when we extracted the lander from the rocket and we were nose to nose with the 2 spacecraft, Aldrin wrote. Aldrin then stated that when the mission returned to Earth, we debriefed and explained exactly what we had observed. The sun reflected off of one of those panels. Not knowing that the public wasn't aware of this information, Aldrin explained. He described his observations many years later in a television interview. Aldrin wrote on Reddit that the UFO people in the United States were very, very angry with him for allegedly withholding the information, even though what he observed was not an alien. So people took his first comment. Let me break this down. He went on a TV interview and talked about how he'd seen this light coming and, thinking that this had already been made public to the, fucking public. And everyone immediately jumped on that and said, he saw a UFO. So then later on, he recognizes, oh man, people are really taking that out of context. I saw either, because you know how the fucking rocket breaks apart when the one module separates from the other, the landing module versus the orbit module.
It's you've seen it all in
film. Pieces come off, debris comes off, and flies around.
A lot of pollution, just floating around.
Yeah,
rocks.
There's pieces of this shit that gets left in space. So, and there's also a sun out there reflecting off stuff. So all that was fact-checked by a bunch of different places, scientists, newspapers, things like that, because they were really hoping to find him caught in a lie. There was also claims circulating, and it's so funny because I went looking for these, the posts, right? The false posts of Buzz Aldrin takes a lie detector test, or here's this recording, and those were all dead links and really dead ends, they'd been either deleted or removed or something.
Truth is out there,
but there was that doesn't mean shit. Or people realized they were spreading false information, got embarrassed, and took it down. Which is exactly what, if I accidentally posted something so outlandish and then it was totally fake, I'd be so oh, they just delete that. So the claim about the lie detector test stemmed from an April 2018 story in the British tabloid The Daily Star tabloid that centered on a vocal analysis done by the Institute of Bioacoustic Biology and Sound Health, which is an organization based in Ohio that carried out complex computer analyses of the astronauts' voice patterns as they told of their close encounters. So some research organization in Ohio did a computer-based voice analysis of the astronauts talking about their encounters, and this became the lie detector test that Buzz Aldrin took. No, that's not... None of that happened. Y'all are nuts. Later on, I want to say maybe it was Apollo 14, but don't quote me. This is separating the bullshit from the meat. Okay, there's like meat and potatoes here. Another astronaut reported seeing a white cylindrical shape outside of the god damn it, window. Words, hate those. A white cylindrical shape, which looked like, he described it as like a Coke can, a white Coke can with a pencil sticking out of it. And later was identified to be probably debris, again, from the separation of the modules, or just space debris or something. He tried to take pictures of it to report to NASA later, yeah, here's some of the shit we saw. But the camera that he used was just not exposed correctly. So it was like either washed out or overexposed or something. And that was also proven, again, to be part of the fucking module separating debris. I love my sciencey explanations.
They would do that a lot with Mars too. They would like take pictures and it'd look like a pyramid, but then it was a rock later. They got close.
We're in the era of people can say and or Photoshop whatever the fuck they want. I don't know if you saw this recently, but a TikTok video went viral because it was a claim of the supermoon seen from Australia. And people were sharing the living shit out of this. And it's like the fucking Death Star coming up out of the ground, and like it spins as it passes overhead. So you're seeing the dark side of the moon as it goes away. But people shared the shit out of this. And plus, Antarctica in this video was like Ohio or something. Like it was like grass and like rock. You know what I mean? There was no snow anywhere. Like people were just running with this and loving it and claiming, oh my God, look at this supermoon. It's like all of that's so painfully fake, and yet there's just no question, and people are taking this and widely accepting it. Not everyone, obviously, but an alarming number of people viewed and shared this video.
Off a cliff.
Oh my God. So I get frustrated with this theory because, again, it would be super easy for anyone to jump on Google and do a little bit of work here for themselves instead of regurgitating things that sound kind of cool. But they don't do that. They don't do that. I have here just kind of a list of all the, well, not all, but a bunch of the fucking, I call it the vertebrae of the fake landing theory because I'm dumb and I don't have real words to describe what I'm doing. So instead of bullet points, it's fucking vertebrae. Deal with it. We already went over this. Who's holding the camera? In another video, it shows, I believe it's Buzz coming down the lunar landing steps in slow motion, and there's like a light behind him, which is, I believe, Neil Armstrong, who's already on the moon, reflecting off his suit, and everyone's freaking out. A, the camera's mounted on the lunar lander. B, the fucking light you're seeing is just a reflection of this super, super white, bright suit that this guy's wearing. It's not fucking magic or UFOs or stage lighting. Multiple light sources, like we just went over. No stars in the photos, we just went over. The sea on the rock. This one might not make sense, but in multiple photos, still images from the Apollo 11 mission, people were circulating one of these photos saying, if you zoom in on this rock, you can see the letter C.
That's suspicious.
Okay. It's a dust particle.
Is it like
from when it was scanned in?
Is it like
digitally.
Roswell, where they said it was
It's
a
all
weather
it
balloon?
is.
Okay.
No, not even remotely like that. But okay.
Someone had like a date
So
and tried to.
it's called an artifact. So it's something that doesn't belong in the photo that ends up in the photo. Sometimes it can be a mechanical malfunction, like when you're using a camera. Say you take a camera, like your phone, right? And you break your fucking phone, but you're still trying to use it like with the camera. Sometimes it may be like missing data in the photo or whatnot. And your phone is going to try to make up for that in whatever way, which is called a digital artifact. And then there's like a physical artifact like this. When I take a photo and I slap that bitch down on a scanner and I scan it, whatever is in between the glass and the photo is also being scanned.
What a terrible time to be alive.
You
No,
comprehend
I
this?
get what you're saying. So you're saying a piece of
I
dust
hate you
or
so
something
much.
is causing a letter to be on a rock.
Yeah. Yeah, because when they re-examined the original film, that was not
Convenient.
there. Because it was just how it was scanned in. And people grabbed that little piece of dust and they were like, it's proof of what? I'm not sure. Like, really, if there is a C on the rock, what's like what are you proving?
Studio C.
Where are you
I
going
don't
with
know.
this, Chief? I don't know. The landing in a vacuum bit where people think there should have been so much more dust kicked up. Speaking of which, there's actually a really cool video online. I'll try to find it and post it if I remember. Of the one of the more recent rovers on the moon, the manned rovers. So it's an astronaut sitting in a little go-kart type thing, and he's driving around on the surface of the moon, and someone else is filming him doing this. And the way that the dust kicks up is crazy. Like, the atmospheric gravity and pressure and all that would normally be there is not there. So as the dust in like the sandy area is being kicked up by the tires, the dust is like continuing to spin in the same shape of the tires. It's wild. It's a really cool looking effect.
Was it a
Um,
video where he was driving like the rover, huh?
yeah, it's just cool because if you were to watch the video, you might not be that impressed, but once you think to yourself to look at the dust movement, and then it's kind of mesmerizing. It's kind of like, it's just, dust would normally kick up and fall to the ground, but in this, like, the dust kicks up and then like keeps spinning in the circle. Like, it's weird. Um, what else do we have? The flag waving in the wind, the wrinkled flag, all that shit. Landing in a vacuum, which we talked about. Did you have any others that you can
I
think
know
of
some people
for
have brought up like the size of their
common?
suits versus the door of the lander, like they wouldn't fit getting in or out, like the logistics of that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know the
I
scale
didn't look
on
up
that,
that
but I
one.
know some of the photos that they talk about looks a little sketchy, like how that would work. But
People love to claim that shit wouldn't fit in. Like, another big one was that for the more recent missions, that the rover wouldn't have fit in to the
that's
lander.
why NASA
Of
made
course, unless
Astroglide.
like,
No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
I don't even have a response for that. But yeah, there's actually videos that they've also made of like how this thing literally disassembles and folds up into pieces and
No,
then reassembles outside of the fucking lander.
assembly and
Common
disassembly.
sense, right?
Yeah,
This it. They're IKEA.
that's what they did with
Okay.
James Webb Telescope.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Honestly, didn't the James Webb Telescope just like explode or something?
A piece of like space dust hit it at a high velocity, caused one of the mirrors to get damaged,
Oh, how heartbreaking.
but it still
So
works though.
it does. Good. I got weirdly attached. So like, oh, these are really cool photos of space. My dumbass like will get attached to the weirdest shit, and I'm like, I love these photos. They're very relaxing. And then of course it's like, James Webb Telescope explodes because
you're all
fuck you,
sad like
They did.
KC.
Wally.
Yeah,
Aww.
it like the whole telescope blew up, or the whole it blew up. They made it sound like it blew up.
They did make it sound like it blew up. They made it sound like it was literally going to be raining down on
Clickbait.
us in some kind of fiery hailstorm. But yeah, actually, that's what most things
It's
are.
kind of scary.
So I
A
know
little piece.
it's
Yeah.
the day after tomorrow kind of bullshit. So why do people believe that we did land on the moon? And again, this comes down to like, do you want to believe this? Yes or no kind of thing. Like, you can believe it, or you can try to like find some abstract reason not to believe it. So moon rocks, like we talked about, apparently NASA, did we say this on air or off air? Apparently NASA sent rocks from one of its missions, moon rocks, to over like 130 different countries and said, hey, study the fuck out of this because people are still stuck on this weird idea we didn't go to the moon. So like, here's some moon rocks. Feel free to study them. Call us out
So
if
they
you
did
want.
like a verification
Go crazy.
video. Like they said it's all like, yeah, we really were here. Like this is legit. Like proof of life.
Give us a blue check mark. There's also a reflector plate, which was placed on the moon, which a laser beam can hit and reflect off of. And people like to say this is irrefutable proof that we went to the moon. And then people also like to respond, well, we could have sent an unmanned drone and dropped it on the moon. And everyone's like, what do we have to do here? There's still footsteps visible on the moon. The same way that like kinetic sand and shit holds its shape because there is obviously no moisture on the moon, right? This is pretty common sense as well. People like to say the footsteps are also fake because there's no moisture on the moon, therefore the footsteps wouldn't be able to hold their shape, which is obviously fucking false. You can leave impressions where there is no moisture. It's science. I don't know how else to tell you this.
These kids didn't play outside that much.
I don't understand half of it.
When they were little. Like,
no. Definitely not in the 120-degree California deserts, where there's also no water. And then literally infinite video footage as people spend so much time and energy picking apart. It's like, we're going to go on this great adventure. We're going to film it. We're going to leave shit to prove we were there. We're going to stick a flag there. We're going to bring back rocks. And everyone still goes, fake. It's fake. Yeah, it's fake. Completely fake. And you're like, what else? Like, what else could they possibly have done is my question to prove they went besides filming it, televising it, bringing back souvenirs, leaving shit there.
And their landers.
And then a big thing too is the people talk about the Van Allen, I believe, radiation belts. And
the Van Allen radiation belt.
Although it is destructive and high levels of radiation,
I read about
that the lander module is able to pass through in a matter of hours versus being there. Yeah, versus being there for days, whereas that longer exposure is when you can have those health concerns. So that's the debunk for that.
Correct. And so you would have approximately received the same amount of radiation as if you were getting a chest x-ray in the 2 hours it took to pass through what we call the Van Allen radiation belts, which is one of the many things I wasn't sure would be worth spending a ton of time on in this outline. And then in my head, I go, I don't want to think people are stupid.
There's also been some interviews with some astronauts, like current astronauts, that talk about these belts and going through them and the dangers of going through them, which kind of makes skeptics concerned. Like, okay, then how do we actually go to the moon with 1960s technology when we're in the 21st century and we're still talking about the dangers of going through this radioactive belt? And so I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying it's NASA conflicting with themselves and their word with a massive jump in technology.
So it's funny because me being pretty poorly educated in general and not being super sciencey or technical about, like, I can't just spout off science shit. I wish I could. I sound so smart. I watched a really interesting video where they tested how much material like aluminum, iron, shit like that could block radiation sufficiently to protect astronauts. So what they did was they went and looked at the lunar module, the Apollo 11 one that supposedly is what took people to the moon, and it was only about 3 inches of material because they had to make it light enough to go, right? Every little ounce counts when you're in space. So they're like, this seems a little fishy that it's only 3 inches of, like, I can't remember what the iron and steel and aluminum, I think. And then they were testing with, like, devices that produce radiation, approximately the same amount the Van Allen belt would have produced as the astronauts moved through it. And they tested it with each material individually and then the 3 inches that would have shielded the astronauts during this actual journey. And it literally blocked like 99.999% of the radiation particles from coming through. So for a 2-hour journey through that level of radiation, that would have actually been sufficient to shield them from that radiation. Now, also, the Van Allen belt, I believe, again, this is from videos that I'm not smart enough to fully understand, fluctuates in its radiation level output. And I believe that they timed their passing through the belt in order to minimize the amount of radiation that they were exposed to, plus the 3 inches of shielding that they had on the craft, which initially people love to say that's not enough, but it was.
I'm just happy to hear that 3 inches is enough. I mean, that's cool.
Well, we'll interview your fiance next, girlfriend, whatever, and find out for her if 3 inches truly is enough. Stay tuned. I'm not hoping for the best, folks. So we talked about how the Soviets denied. No, we didn't. The Soviets denied at one point that there ever was a space race, probably because they were
in the Soviets' defense, they sent the first human into space, the first unmanned satellite in space, they sent the first animal in space, and then they also launched the first space station. So, yeah, we get to say that we walked on the moon, but they get to say they did all this other stuff. I mean, I think they kind of won the space race, in my opinion.
Now, before we go on to this next giant section, because it's a giant section, why do you think we've never been back to the moon? We've landed there, for context, 6 times. So 12 different people, 2 each time, have walked on the moon. God bless that stupid fucking third guy who got stuck there, like feet away, like having serious FOMO
Did they have to draw
about not
straws,
being
or
able
like
to like
how
walk
do
on
you
the
find out
moon.
who has to stay on
Because
the
each
craft while the two walk? Like,
okay, so here's our little our creative exercise. All 3 of us are going to the moon right now. Which one of us is staying in the spacecraft?
if I have an opportunity to walk the moon, I'm walking the moon. Or we'll
I will
trade. Like
kill
when you guys
either of
come
you
back,
without
just let me just
blinking.
take a little stroll around the
So,
lander, like something.
I don't know how I could survive.
And then to
missing
come
out.
back,
Find a way.
Huh?
I'll find a way to get back there. I'll make my own like little.
We're watching as our like command module just floats
didn't they
away.
make
So
it
all
like a
3 of us are
George?
standing on the
Didn't they
moon
make
because we
like a
couldn't
George
decide.
Clooney movie about that?
We're like, oh,
Like with Sandra Bullock or whatever, where they're like see their spaceship float away, or they get detached or something.
Oh, I forgot the name of that movie.
I forgot too. Yeah, it's like
you're
a
right.
thriller.
Now that I think about
They
it,
got in space or lost.
what?
I gotta look it. I gotta
What?
look it
No,
back
now I'm
up.
imagining the
I was
preview in
thinking
my
out
head.
like
Like I
probably
can
like
see it.
6 years ago, 5-6 years ago.
Okay. So, yes, we've been to the moon 6 times, supposedly. And then, from what I've read, it's a whole lot of shit about, oh, well, they decided the money wasn't worth it. Interest was lost. Like, we've been there, done that. You can send unmanned rovers and,
Well, in
equipment
defense of
there to
us not
collect
going back to the
specimens. Right, go
moon,
ahead.
I could say like if the moon is a whole lot of nothing, and we already got all the samples that we wanted, and we already have the equipment like to ground penetrating radar, all this other technology, take pictures and observe the moon. I don't see the reason why you'd spend that much money to send humans back, like you're saying. Like if you've already gone, like you said, the 6 times, 12 people, you already have your samples,
Yeah.
you already have your rocks, like you said, been there, done that. Now you're like, okay, now you're looking at these farther planets or things you don't have that information on.
And now they're more.
Yeah, we
Sorry.
can. No, don't apologize. I'm the one who talks over people.
And now
So
they're
go
like
ahead.
more focused on Mars. They don't really want to send people to the moon.
And why? And then why would like Musk want to like
Yeah,
colonize Mars over the moon? Like the moon's right there. Like it's closer to Earth.
I don't know why rich white people do rich white people things. I don't. That's. They live in a different universe than we do, anyways.
I
So
don't.
just let
I'm
them
not
live
there
there.
yet. I don't understand yet. When I get
Yeah, I don't get it. Maybe
Oh, okay.
someday.
Little sidetrack on here.
I don't
So
fucking know.
you win the lottery, $10 million. How do you go about claiming your prize? Who do you tell? Who do you not tell? Run me through like a 30-second spiel. You win the 10 million. What do you do?
Boogie, you go first.
I ain't telling nobody, and I'm gonna go cash it in.
Nice.
And what are you doing with it? What are you doing with your 10 million?
$10 million. I'll probably just buy a small house. To be honest, a small house, like
That's very smart.
I don't know, maybe
Under the radar.
You could buy a small island.
like I hate walking on. So that's out of the question.
Again, I
Brett,
probably wouldn't
what
tell
would you
anybody
do?
because I'd be getting relatives I didn't even know I had that'd be showing up out of the woodwork. So I would probably, out of the 10 million, I'd put 8 million in an offshore account that only I know about. Tell everybody I only won 2 million. And then what I would do is I'd probably buy like a ranch in Montana, get some cattle and some horses, and like just disappear.
That sounds fun. I'll probably go to.
Well,
I'll probably
you're
go
going to
to
where?
school actually because I can't go to school right now.
Oh, that's so sad. I hate that America's like this. Like, oh, if I had like a basic amount of money, I would get an education and a place to live. Like,
No soup for you.
like it's like our number one goal. Please, sir, may I have some more? I'm so hungry. Like, some table scraps, Musk. Yeah, so the first thing I'm doing is I am setting up you and your brood
Okay.
for life.
And I'm not
Brett,
telling
you're the only
anybody.
person I'm telling. I'm then disappearing off the face. No, you're not. No, I'm talking like I'm getting you a nice house, dogs, a place
Well,
for, like,
this is
each
where
kid
being able
gets
to
their own
keep people's
bedroom with a
secrets
fucking
pays off.
castle bunk bed or
Because they know
something.
you won't tell other people.
Yeah. Right. So I'm making sure my niece and nephews are taken care of first. Trying to think if I know anyone else who's like in critical need. My people, my very, very, very few people would be the first ones to benefit from this. And then KC, who? I'm disappearing off the face of the fucking planet. You will never see me or hear from me or know that I exist ever again. I am going to take a tiny house, drop it into my personal 9,000 acre woods, and I'm going to rescue gimpy dogs, like the one-eyed, three-legged dogs. I'll have great Wi-Fi, my own personal gym, and humanity will forget about me until they find my bones.
That was beautiful.
It's a fucking dream.
Man, it sounds like
Thank you.
we all deserve this.
That's my dream. We do. We
See,
deserve
I'd be doing
isolation
cats.
and
I'd be
rescue
getting
dogs.
cats.
And I can smell it now.
I like cats, but then
Well, like cats bathe themselves, they clean up after themselves. Dogs don't. Oh, I forgot to say, I would set aside a large chunk of money for charity.
$dollars.
my cat was giving me a bath the other day. I was like, yeah.
I have questions about your hygiene habits now, but okay.
Oh my god!
It's like I don't bathe, but my cat bathes me. Yeah, anyone I know in my life who's deserving. I'm not saying that I keep a itemized list of everyone who's ever wronged me.
That's that meme that I think came out. I sent to you, or it said, "It says we need MySpace back because our friends need to be ranked. Some of us need to be put in our place." You posted it, okay?
That
okay,
was I posted that.
I got from somewhere.
You meme stealer. I was like, I need MySpace to come back. Some of my friends will be put in their place again, reminded of their place. We're gonna have to have a part of the show every time now where Brett verbally tries to describe a meme.
But it lands.
That's like happened every single time. Like, we're like, what the fuck?
I missed that. No, where I could like make my background a different color.
I know you could like put music on there. Oh, okay. Well, we derailed a little bit, but that was still pretty interesting. And what we all have in common is our deep, all-encompassing, mind-numbing desire to completely dissolve from society.
Only like a few people, not. Other than that, I don't like the human
race. Helping the demon race first.
Right?
So
everybody's.
I know I tried this, but okay. So the last part of this outline is going over the huge conspiracy of Stanley fucking Kubrick.
I'm just gonna keep doing my outlines like this because my like stupid ass is like, I don't know what to title this, so I'll write Stanley fucking Kubrick, and then that becomes like read aloud on air, and I'm like, I guess we're rolling with this. Stanley fucking Kubrick. What is with this guy? All right, so we already talked a little about.
Isn't that where the AI is named Hal?
The Space Odyssey. A Space Odyssey.
I think it is.
A. Don't know. Couldn't finish it. Tried again. Got bored. I know people love this, and I'm probably gonna get like absolutely crucified for.
Yeah, is the AI? Yeah.
I think it is where Hal. I think I'm right on that. Something thousand. I don't. Yeah. So, to me, the craziest and most like leaky theory, as in there's like just it's like a fucking colander just full of holes, but people love this. They like to claim that The Shining was Stanley Kubrick's great mea culpa to the world to kind of confess without confessing that he actually did film the space landing. And here's all of the quote heavy quotation marks evidence. So there's several pretty bonkers fucking theories on The Shining. And there's a documentary that came out called Room 237. which
You
details
said the
all of these
237. Like, I'm just now
theories. Have
looking
you
at
heard
this
this?
outline, but that isn't that like the miles or kilometers from the moon?
Correct. So, and I believe that's in here somewhere. Where's it at? We'll get to that.
I don't know why I remember that.
So, it's the perfect film to project your conspiracy theories onto because Stanley Kubrick was like fucking notoriously detail oriented and he never left anything to chance. And B, he's dead. So he's therefore unable to disprove any of these crazy theories that have come up. He's just not there to defend himself. So this is really nice to have this like perfect sticking board for theories. So several of them are really interesting in that Room 237 documentary, including a claim that the Native Americans on the hotel's food cans suggest an underlying theme of American imperialism, and an interesting dissection with a dolly cam that proves that the spiraling architecture of the Overlook Hotel is in fact impossible. So the biggest theory that is fucking nuts, I believe, is that there's a theorist named Jay Widener, and he claims that Stanley Kubrick littered The Shining with clues to suggest that he filmed the fake moon landing for NASA in 1969. Evidence.
I filmed it.
Heavy quotes. You got. Have you seen this movie?
The Shining? Yeah, a long time ago. I need to watch it again though.
I've seen it a while back. Like I'd say, like
Brett,
last time I saw it was maybe a decade ago, and then I'm having on my watch list to watch the sequel that came out on HBO. Yeah, okay. Dr. Sleep.
Are you talking about Dr. Sleep? So I've both seen The Shining a couple times. I've also read the book, and I've also read Dr. Sleep, but I have not seen Dr. Sleep. So this was really interesting to me because kind of against my will, I love Stephen King books. But Widener, this conspiracy theorist Widener, he believes that NASA was so desperate to beat Russia in the space race that they contacted director Stanley Kubrick to shoot a fake landing so they could at least appear to have beaten them to the surface of the moon. The evidence for this is that there are apparent signs of the lighting technique known as front projection, no idea what that is, in the infamous NASA moon landing video, which Kubrick had pioneered for use in movies like 2001, A Space Odyssey. So The Shining, which was released 11 years after Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, is heavy with symbolism that suggests Kubrick was confessing his secret. Symbolism like little Danny Torrance is wearing the film's biggest clue, a jumper with the Apollo 11 rocket knitted right into the pattern. It's hardly subtle and suggests that Kubrick really wasn't doing such a great job at keeping quiet. However, when asked about the sweater, crew members were like, well, he just wanted something that looked really handmade. So like the costume guy went through his wardrobe and said, this is like the ugliest sweater I have, and put it on the kid. But yeah, it's a confession, guys. So one big change, this is where the 237 thing comes in. One big change from Stephen King's book that Kubrick saw fit to make was to change the number of the iconic room in the Overlook from room 217 to room 237. Obvious. And the reasons for this are obvious because apparently the average distance between the Earth and the Moon is 237,000 miles. So room 237 represents the fake landing set. And the Overlook Hotel represents America. And Danny, who approaches the room, represents
people
Stanley
are going
Kubrick's
very,
artistic
very
side.
deep into this.
That's some deep thinking.
Well, and then the next part is the page that Jack leaves behind at the typewriter. Cast iron proof that Kubrick faked the moon landing, where you see the word all, as in all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Widener sees A11, short for Apollo 11. Apparently, this line is an insight into Kubrick's mental condition, that working on the Apollo 11 project and having to keep it a secret has made him go a little crazy. Excuse me, I almost sneezed on air. That was weird.
The whatever you did instead was weirder.
What I say?
Like that was so fucking weird. I hope you never do that again.
Not say.
Rest, son. Rest. if Jack Torrance represents Kubrick, then Shelley Duvall's Wendy character represents Kubrick's own wife, Christina. And the scene in which Wendy confronts Jack about his behavior and suggests he has to quit has parallels with Kubrick's own secret, because Jack's response was, "That is so typical of you. I've made an agreement. I have obligations to my employers." So they want to say that this is a parallel of Stanley Kubrick's wife confronting him about faking the moon landing, and so he just makes that happen. The symbolism stretch is so wild to me, like the amount of like mental acrobatics you have to do to like project your beliefs about this. It's just I don't have words for
My
it, really.
dad, my father.
Like, yeah, oh, this is an like a metaphor for how my father had an obligation to his employers too. My dad also had a job. Oh my god, it's about my life. Like, I don't.
So
Brett, you want to take the next one?
Widener, I'm not sure how you say this guy's name, also claims the iconic hexagonal pattern found on the carpets in the Overlook Hotel were designed specifically to reference the Apollo 11 launching pads. This is how Kubrick effectively owns up to his engineering of the biggest fakery in human history via carpet samples.
Hexagonal.
Like, I've seen a lot of hexagonal carpets. Like, I don't see really anything too crazy there. And this is what filmed 11 years later, so what, in the late 70s, early 80s. Widener didn't stop at room numbers and carpet patterns. He claims that the fact Danny sees the corpses of twins is a reference to Gemini, the NASA missions before Apollo, where 7 Apollo space missions but only 6 landed. In the hotel lobby, there are 6 crates of a soft drink 7-Up. Dick Halloran comes from Florida, which is where Apollo 11 was launched. The owner of the hotel has an eagle on his windowsill. The Apollo 11 lunar module was nicknamed the Eagle. The truth is out there if you look hard enough.
NASA's satanic.
So this was my personal opinion, which I had to write down so as not to forget what I think. So we've said it multiple times. Stanley Kubrick was notorious for his extreme attention to detail. So if he did film the moon landing, we would not even be having this conversation at all. This podcast wouldn't exist because he was so detail-oriented that all the little details people like to point out so much, proving the moon landing was all an elaborate hoax, wouldn't even exist to criticize because he would have made it perfect. You know what I mean? He would have taken out all these little things that we now see as proof. You know what I mean? Like the multiple lighting sources. Oh, no stars in the sky or whatever. Like, if he really was to go about filming this and it was fake, he would have fixed all that. He would have done all that. You see what I'm saying? That's my theory. We made it to the end of that outline, which was a bitch to put together because I kept deleting huge chunks out of here because I'm like, we don't need to talk about that so much.
Get some people going.
Like, what's important? What do people want to hear? This is the truth is out there, folks. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts.
I think that based on like the science and the research that I did on this too, like I didn't really contribute too much to the outline, but like I did my own like research and prepping for this, and things that I had thought were really fake or sketchy, I found kind of stuff to debunk it, and stuff that wasn't from the actual source. Like I'm not a big fan of looking at NASA's explanation of it because like I want to find like the third parties or other scientists or other people with, reputations on the line that are defending this, and the reasons why they defend it. So I believe we landed there. I know that definitely was a pissing competition between two countries during the Cold War and trying to bankrupt the other and get dominance. But I think there's also an explanation why we haven't been back to the moon. But yeah, I think it happened, and I think now some of these are kind of funny that they still have traction.
I know. Boogie, what do you think is the most convincing possible hole in NASA's moon landing? If you had to pick one of
the
these,
most convincing that makes it fake.
It was fake. Mm-hmm. Do Do any of these hold any, like, in your mind, did any of these make you go, maybe?
I think my standard of evidence is too high, maybe. I just didn't. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a cynic like me. I'm not gonna lie. If my FBI agent is listening, I'm sorry for all the things I Googled. I'm not that dumb. I just wanted to have answers for Bret. Like, I promise you, I don't believe Buzz Aldrin saw a fucking UFO, so I'm sorry I Googled that trying to find the article. My God, like, if someone were to look at my Google search history right now, I look like
Google knows the
crazy
real
idiot.
you
Not just
because you
dumb,
put your
not just
thoughts
crazy,
into
but
it
both.
more than questions.
I hope Google knows that I'm neither a sovereign citizen nor a flat earther nor a Bigfoot believer, because that's what Google knows about me, is that I'm reading this
Yeah.
stuff. And then it's probably listening to me as well as I have flat earth documentaries on in the background.
You're in the black.
So, like,
Man,
help.
and I got that Matrix algorithm TikTok, and not you.
God,
Oh damn.
I know, because you.
I don't
you
even
leave
go
me
on TikTok
red.
unless you send me something stupid, and then I'm forced to. It's against my will.
So.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah, you and everyone else. I'm like the worst about replying to people. Like, not only is my memory bad, but also in my mind, I think if I don't reply, this is what a clown I fucking am. In my head, I go, I'll reply to that later. And then it's wiped from my memory bank for the rest of my life. And then someone's like, why didn't you ever respond? And I'm like, because I'm dumb. Like, I don't know what to tell you here. My memory wiped completely. Like, people send me shit at the gym, I don't have any reception. So I'll
Well,
sometimes
you just spoke
receive
at the
it, but
gym.
nothing will
Didn't you just
load.
have like a
Go ahead.
really like heated experience at the gym that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Hold on. Yes. Thank you for winding me up about this again.
It was
Hashtag
on
I'm sorry,
purpose.
not sorry for what you're about to
Oh,
experience.
well,
I feel like
before
you
we
do
get
this
into
on
our
purpose.
floor to them,
Like, right at the end.
segment.
Okay. Here we go. I don't. I'm still so infuriated about this experience I had yesterday at the gym. So I have a history of powerlifting. So when I go to the gym, I'm angry, highly caffeinated, listening to music so loud that everyone outside my headphones can hear it. And I'm there to fucking lift heavy weights and make a lot of weird noises and talk to no one. I'm like yelling, I'm about to move my mic back. And I make sure that everyone knows this. I don't wear makeup to the gym. I have big, giant headphones, and I have a hat pulled down over my eyes. And the music's always loud so people can hear it. I don't know what to do to look meaner, bitchier, more intimidating, more unapproachable. I wear mean t-shirts and leggings and tennis shoes. I'm not there in like a little sports bra. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like,
You need like
I'm
a
there
sweater that
to
says "fuck off."
and I have a hat I literally have a hat that says "fuck off," and people, it's assuming a lot if you think these guys can read. So my biggest pet peeve is when men, a haver of a penis, attempts to approach and interact with me at the gym. When I'm sending off every nonverbal signal that I'm there to lift weights. Full stop. Want to go home. And I'm working. I'm sweating. I'm grunting. I'm fighting for my life. Definitely don't want to talk to anyone. So there's me with the demeanor and outfit I just described. And I was just in the back room of the gym doing like, I believe, what was it? Like heavy hip thrust. Okay, so I had like over 300 pounds on this bar, and I'm thrusting it, making weird noises, doing legs. Okay, finish that up, rack everything, and I walk through the gym past all the cable machines. So it was like the cable machines, little walkway wall, and I'm looking at my phone, hat down like this, not looking at anyone, music blasting, and this big steroided motherfucker in a stringer steps directly into my path. Okay, so that I can't, like, there's nowhere for me to go. So, and again, I'm sweating, I'm mad, my face is red. So I like look at him and give a beat, and then I have to take off my headphones, and I don't even say anything. I'm like, just announce yourself. Like, what is it you fucking want? And he then goes, he's like, he's like, with your hat pulled down like that and looking down at your phone, you know, you're gonna run into a wall or something. And I stare at him, and I'm like, again, my blood's kind of pumping, and my headphones are really loud, so much louder than I normally would have spoken. I say, well, yeah, I fucking look like this, so nobody tries to fucking talk to me. And like people who were like over by the freeways like turned around and like looked at us. I said that like really loud. And he goes, well, I guess it didn't work. And then he tries to grab my arm. Okay. Oh, okay. Whew. So I pulled my arm back, and I'm like, hey, just keep in mind, I'm really fucking violent. And then I step around him and walk, because now I'm like seeing red. I'm like really mad. I'm like, no, you did not just fucking try to grab me. I have such a bad... And so he takes a minute, and then he's like, so am I, like after me. And I'm like, yup. And I put my headphones back on like angrily and like go lift. But like I was so mad about this for like hours afterwards. Because like the more I thought about it, I was sitting there like steaming. I was like, the fuck, like, and for anyone with a penis, okay, let me just do a little PSA here. Leave us alone, okay? That's just it. Just leave us alone. Especially after we loudly announce that we don't want to fucking talk to you. And then maybe also don't touch people without permission. Oh my God. And I get it. If you're making eye contact with some cute girl across the gym or some cute guy and you want to like have a little flirty flirt, do your thing. But physically blocking someone's path, where if I was any other woman, or if I was smaller or like maybe like shyer, it would have, the simple act of him blocking my way would have been like scary, right? Because it's a big dude, you know what I mean? And he's like physically blocking me from continuing. He's not just saying hi from the corner. Like
I just picture the who is it, the lobster from SpongeBob that's like always like lifting weights, like little skinny legs.
Oh yeah.
I really don't know what I have to do to look meaner. Like, I think I look pretty mean already, but like, what do I have to do? And Rachel was telling about this, and she was like, you should make a t-shirt that says, you know, and she gave me a bunch of snarky sayings that I can't remember. And I'm like, again, and
then remember we came up with that great idea. Like if we ever one day get big enough to do like a Patreon or something like that, we'll call it Only Fly Zone. Like OnlyFans. Yeah.
Only Fly Zone. Yeah. And then if you want to give me money to step into my orbit and speak to me. But when I'm at the gym minding my own goddamn business, maybe you should also mind your own goddamn business and not, first of all, don't get in my way. Don't physically step into my way on purpose. After someone says they don't want to talk to you, respect that and walk away. And absolutely the fuck do not touch someone without permission. And definitely don't combine
KC,
those things.
I'm going to bring you down from that plane that we just lifted you to. So I'm going to let you go into this week's Florida Them to wrap up the show. Calm down. Just breathe.
I'm steaming.
Because I'm your sibling.
How did you wind me up like that again? Why would you? I was just calmed down from yesterday. God, I feel like this is just revenge or something for my joke about 3 inches. I don't know. Well, before we go into Florida Them, Boogie, do you have any thoughts for us? I'm sorry if we like steamrolled you or talked too much.
No, you're good. It was fun.
Well, thank you for being on with us. I'm going to finish this up with a Florida Them, which is my favorite. If I can
no problem.
Get my internet to work.
We like having guests on the show.
Thank you for coming. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to like really nutshell this one because the headline really says it all. A Florida man who owes the city $30,000 for not mowing his lawn is planning to appeal to the Supreme Court. Because of code violation fines. Because if you're going to double down, just double down up to the Supreme Court. He's a 72-year-old man named James Ficken. And I don't even know how to pronounce the name of the city. Dunedin?
Or Lord of the Rings, Dunedain.
So, yeah. If $30,000 fine for not mowing your lawn isn't excessive,
but that's
I
like
don't know
late
what
fees.
is.
That's
and
like,
that's the kind of shit you can get up to in
delinquencies.
Florida.
Like, that's a lot of stuff piled on top of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's trying to make it sound like
his yard probably looks like the Everglades.
Here,
like, you probably need to mow that shit. You don't know what alligators are in there. That is terrible.
Well, he's in Florida.
But
Yeah, you're.
Oh yeah. Basically the violation's
But
stacked.
our next episode, I think we have on the dock is going to be Flat Earth. We're going to be recording Tuesday. Is that right, KC?
I believe that's right. Again, I'm going to now switch my heavy moon hoax focus to Flat Earth, which I know Bret loves this shit. So I'm also hoping to exit that episode with my sanity and also hopefully you not being a flat earther. But Bret, after I know you said you're kind of in the middle. What side do you lean towards now that we've done this episode and you've had this information presented to you?
I think we went. I think that there was definitely a lot of pressure and maybe some psyops going on with Russia about what our space program could actually do. However, I do believe we went there. We probably did walk it once, got a few samples, and then we didn't really have a reason to go back. Yes, I'm now more skeptical of the Earth and Antarctica than anything else. So,
oh my God! All right. Well, on that note, hey, no fly zoners, thanks for sticking with us. Please go follow us on the socials. We are over halfway to our Instagram goal, and if you would like to jump in with me and if you want to fuck up some trolls, you can go look at my reels and see this crazy fucker who's probably high, trying to like throw transphobic slurs at me. And
I do want to say hello to our listeners now in New Zealand. We now picked up New Zealand as a listening audience. So Auckland, shout out to you.
Love you.
I just think of like the little hobbit town, the Shire.
I don't know how to talk
New Zealand.
I know. Bilbo Baggins, we would die for you. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on our socials and please send us a message because I really want to know what life is like.
It was great having Boogie. We're going to have him back on with us on a couple future episodes as well.
See you next time.
So until next time, thank you.
Yeah. Bye, Boogie.